Hello noble ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking, and Alexander the Great keeps being great even after death, because one of the greatest mysteries, I want to say, that has to do with classical antiquity, ancient history, is indeed the location of his body, which, of course, no one knows where it is. Or do we? Well, according to the internet and quite a few articles, the body of Alexander the Great is actually in Saint Mark's tomb in Venice. And I mean, as someone who is from Italy and has been specifically in Venice and checked out Saint Mark's Square and the cathedral, I'm a little bummed by that, because I mean, if it really was there, why did they not show it to me? To me! But anyways, let's see if this theory, because a theory is, holds any water. Let's read through these. From the collector, is the body of Alexander the Great actually in Saint Mark's tomb? The tomb and body of the great conqueror Alexander the Great of Macedonia have been lost for millennia. Could they be hiding at the heart of Saint Mark's in Venice? According to an intriguing theory, the key to one of the greatest archaeological mysteries of all time, the location of Alexander the Great's tomb, could be hiding in Venice. In June of 323 BC, points for using BC, Alexander III of Macedon, better known as Alexander the Great, fell terribly ill. He had conquered much of the ancient Mediterranean world and had had no intention of stopping. Yet, that spring, he had journeyed into the swamps surrounding Babylon, and shortly after was battling a severe fever. Despite the illness, he continued the planning of his next campaign, the conquest of the Arabian Peninsula. However, his condition only worsened. Soon, he was periodically losing the ability to speak and falling in and out of consciousness. After 12 days of fighting, he lost the battle on the 11th of June and never woke again. He was only 32 years old. Yeah, he was very young, wasn't he? As they say, the flame that burns twice as bright burns half as long. That is so true with so many historical characters, by the way. Alexander's top generals had been his closest friends since their childhood together in the Macedonian court. 10 years of constant military campaign had only strengthened that bond. They were grief-sickened over the loss of their king. In a strange twist of fate, Alexander may have still been alive, in a coma, even as his friends began to mourn. I have heard of that, yeah. The ancient historians reported that his body remained perfect and unspoiled for over a week in the hot Babylonian summer. The most likely explanation is that he was suffering from a form of malaria that frequently ends in a coma. So it's possible that they thought he was dead, but he wasn't yet. Of course, you also have to put this into perspective. One of the things that Alexander constantly pushed, and that was pushed onto him by his mother and then reinforced by the people around him, is that he was a god. He saw himself as a god. So you have to imagine that from this point of view of the people, when they see that his body doesn't spoil, doesn't rotten, then they may have connected it to that and given it a religious explanation or a supernatural explanation, rather than thinking, is he in a coma, is he still alive? So yeah, there is that as well. We have to consider if all of this actually happened as described. Regardless, Alexander's fate was sealed, and eventually he did die. His friends commissioned a gold sarcophagus and gold casket to hold Alexander's body, as well as a massive ornate funerary cart to carry the casket back to Macedonia for burial. The procession never completed its journey. While still on the road, one of Alexander's successors, Ptolemy, seized the body and interred it in Memphis, Egypt. Later, his son moved Alexander the Great into a lavish tomb in the city of Alexandria. To explain this, we have to imagine the fact that such a powerful and politically influential military leader, also because of his connection through religion, his divinity, all of that had real effects and repercussions into the real world. And so this is why someone like Ptolemy would do something like this, because now we can say, hey, I am the true descendant. I am the one who will continue to have the same power as Alexander did, because I'm the one who has the body, something like that, like a relic. You can look at it like a relic. The whole man became a relic. Alexander's tomb disappears. Alexander's body remained in his magnificent tomb for centuries, a fact well documented by ancient sources. Cleopatra angered the inhabitants of Alexandria by taking gold from Alexander's tomb to finance her wars with Octavianus Augustus. Records detail visits to Alexander's tomb by several Roman emperors, including Julius Caesar, Augustus, Caligula, Septimius Severus, and Caracalla. Yet by 400 AD, John Chrysostom visited Alexandria and hoped to see the famous tomb, but its location was lost. The very last reference to Alexander the Great's tomb came only 10 years earlier, circa 390 AD, from Libanius. He commented on Alexandria, where the corpse of Alexander is displayed. It's fascinating stuff. The short span of time in which Alexander's tomb disappeared from the written record was a time of great turmoil in the ancient world. Between 389 and 391 AD, Emperor Theodosius issued the Theodosian decrees. These documents established Christianity as the only legal religion and banned pagan practices. In the following years, he oversaw and authorized the destruction of numerous pagan temples and holy places, which is unfortunate because I hate it when that happens, and I say that as a Christian. The cultural significance and architectural marvel of some of the creations and buildings, including temples and places of worship that belong to religions that predate Christianity, destroying them is ridiculous. It's a ridiculous practice, something that I really, really dislike, whether it comes from this, whether it comes from Islam, as they destroy statues, for instance. I don't think these should be destroyed because they are an inherently testimonial to the past and a connection to something that now should be considered secular, which is the idea of we're studying the past, what they believed and what they thought. If your faith is strong in Jesus or in Allah, whatever your faith is, a statue is not going to change that, is it? So destroying the statues is a political move, not a move of faith in its purest form. Alexander, whose cult had worshipped him as a god since his death, and even before, would have been a prime target for this destruction. It may well be that Alexander's tomb and remains fell victim to these purges. However, the sudden and somewhat unexplained appearance of another famous corpse in the city of Alexander suggests a tantalizing alternative. Yeah, it's also possible that he was moved, because once again he had a cult following, and they knew that that was happening. The body of Saint Mark. In the late 4th century AD, and this is written very well, by the way, ancient sources began to reference the tomb of Saint Mark in Alexandria. The first mention comes from Saint Jerome in 392 AD, just 2 years after the last record of Alexander the Great's tomb. The existence of a body of Saint Mark in itself is itself mysterious. According to Christian tradition, Mark was martyred by pagans in 68 AD in the city of Alexandria. Dorotheus Eutychius and the Chronicon Pascal state that Mark's killers burnt his body as a final snub to Christians. No mention of a sacred body of Mark exists for over 300 years, so they are thinking they swapped it. They said it was Mark, but it wasn't. What about all the gold, though? Where did that go? A text called The Acts of Saint Mark gives the explanation that a miraculous storm put out the flames and the Christians were able to snatch the corpse from the pyre. However, the earliest dating of this document also places it in the late 4th century AD, could have been manipulated, hundreds of years after the death of Mark and in the middle of the chaotic period which saw the disappearance of Alexander. Author Andrew Chugg proposes that the supposed body of Saint Mark actually is that of the famous Alexander the Great, rebranded as Mark in the midst of the Theodosian decrees in order to save the famous conqueror from destruction by Christians. I mean, sure, it's an interesting theory, but a theory still remains unless you can prove it somehow. Can you date the corpse? A second corporeal heist. It's a gorgeous mosaic, by the way. Ironically, if this theory is true, the very rebranding brought the corpse into danger once again. By the late 7th century AD, Arab forces had conquered much of North Africa, including Alexandria. Tensions between Muslims and Christians in the region were rising. In 828 AD, 2 Venetian merchant ships captains made a deal with the local Christian authorities to take the supposed body of Saint Mark to safety. They removed the corpse from its tomb, laid it in a wagon covered with pork to forestall any close inspection of the contents, and successfully smuggled it aboard the ship bound for Venice. Would that be enough? Because I know that Muslims can't eat pork, but can they touch it? I don't actually know. Couldn't they use someone who isn't Muslim to move it around? A smaller church initially housed the remains. In 1063 AD, Venetian officials commissioned the magnificent Basilica di San Marco, which still stands today. On October, it is magnificent. Every time we go to Venice, we always walk around it, take pictures. We don't always go in because sometimes the queues are insane, but on October 8th, 1094, the body was laid to rest in the crypt under the church. There it remained for almost 800 years, until frequent flooding began to threaten the safety of the corpse. In 811, the church removed the remains and reinterred them in the high altar on the main floor. Is there a mummy in St. Mark's? I wouldn't think so. Several tidbits of information hint that the body in Saint Mark's may have initially been mummified. There are no circumstances under which ancient Christians would have followed pagan mummification practices. I agree, maybe in Egyptian Coptic context, maybe, but in general, no. Therefore, mummification points to a different occupant of Mark's tomb, really. Martino, I understand that's when you start looking at that. Martino da Canale, in La Chronique des Vénitiens from 1275, related that if, open quotes, if all the spices of the world had been gathered together in Alexandria, they could not have so perfumed the city as did the aroma of spices coming from the corpse, consistent with mummification. Additionally, records indicate that linen wrappings sealed the corpse at the time. Interesting. Well, it could have still been a local practice, but yeah, I'm still not gonna smell the corpse, thank you, but sure, I mean, if you say so. Mosaics in the basilica depicts the body as an intact corpse rather than a skeleton. This could simply be artistic license, but perhaps it reflects that a mummified body did initially arrive in Venice. Further hints come from the transfer of the remains to their current location at the High Altar. Leonardo Conte Manin documented the event. His observations contain no evidence to suggest that the skeleton showed damage from fire as Mark's should. His assertion that skeletons stuck to the cloth in certain areas is consistent with the expected state of a former now decomposed mummy. If we are to believe, once again, the early Christian accounts of the miraculous storm that prevented the body from being burnt, then why should there be burns, evidence of burns onto the freaking skeleton? If anything, even if the fire started a little bit and then it got quenched by the rain, and so the whole burning failed, the flames would have burned outside, like the skin. But if you have a skeleton, yeah, good luck burning a skeleton. Yeah, I disagree with this statement. It doesn't make any logical sense to expect the skeleton to have any signs of burning. Alexander's tomb at the heart of Saint Mark's. A final piece of sculpture provides the most intriguing and unanswered question as to the origins of the body in the tomb of St. Mark. A large piece of carved limestone, a broken portion of a larger original, was found only a few meters from the site of Mark's original tomb in the crypt of the Basilica. The block, now on display at the cloister of St. Apollonia in Venice, depicts a relief of a shield, greaves, swords, and portion of a spear. Oh, I see. Yeah, that does sound like Alexander the Great. These armaments are consistent with Macedonian styles, a fact independently asserted in a study by Eugenio Polito in 1998, years before Andrew Chug began his research. That is fascinating. Polito describes, open quotes, and an attributed fragment relating to a funerary monument with analogous motifs is today conserved in Venice, but definitely derives from the Hellenistic world. It featured a Macedonian shield with a star motif at its center, a pair of greaves and a long lance, a sarissa, and on the smallest side the remains of a sword. The block must have belonged to a large monument that may generically be placed between the 3rd and the beginning of the 2nd century BC. Now I see what the fuss is all about. Making connections to Alexander, let's see. The star motif bears a striking resemblance to the Star of Vergina or Star of Macedon. It was a symbol closely associated with Alexander's family and visible in many related tombs. The sword carved into the block is undisputed as a Greek-style kopis. If one extends the spear at the angle of its descent to its logical conclusion at the base of the stone block, its size matches the distinctive Macedonian sarissa. These deadly weapons developed by his father helped Alexander the Great conquer the world. Yep. However, Roman military tactics rendered them obsolete, making later Roman carvings of such a spear unlikely. Well, unless it was like, well, then again, later Roman carvings, just because it became militarily obsolete, and that's already a debatable discussion. It really depends on terrain, rather than, oh, it doesn't work anymore. So this is a little bit of a point of debate. But even then, why can't the Romans use the spear as a representation of something in art? They could still do it, even if they don't think it's a useful weapon at that time in military context. Why was this carving with clear Macedonian connection? That is the stronger element. Located in crypt of Saint Mark's Basilica, less than a stone's throw from the body's original resting place. It's a good point. Furthermore, Andrew Chug has made measurements based on an extrapolation of the original stone's dimensions. He asserts that the slab is a perfect match to be an outer cover of the sarcophagus of Nectaris Sta Nebo II, now on display in the British Museum. This sarcophagus was long associated with Alexander. Chag asserts it to be the likely first resting place of the body of Alexander in Memphis, almost complete. Its intended occupant had fled Egypt, and the magnificent tomb lay unoccupied when Ptolemy arrived with Alexander's body, needing a temporary resting place fit for such a great king. Be interesting to see if the measures match with what we think Alexander's size was. That could be interesting to see. Both ancient source materials and modern scientific techniques offer multiple routes to investigate and identify the body purported to be that of Saint Mark. Yeah, can they not like radiocarbon date it? Not that radiocarbon is always guaranteed correct, but still, I would try it. Oh, there you go. Multiple carbon dating, DNA testing, and tooth enamel analysis techniques could be employed. Exactly. Understandably, these might be less attractive as they would require invasive sample removal from the body. I get it, but if it's small, I would let them do it. Like, don't cut the whole arm off, but if you can take some tissue samples that don't, I would absolutely do it 100%. However, much could be learnt merely from physical examination of the remains, so they haven't done it yet. Visual inspection could establish gender and age at the time of death. Good, yeah, that's another thing. Ancient historians have recorded 2 well-known wounds of Alexander that struck bone, one in the lower leg, correct, and one to his chest bone, likely the sternum. Evidence of bone damage and healing in these 2 locations would be reason to warrant further investigation. I absolutely agree. Lack of that damage would be sufficient to dismiss theories of the body being that of Alexander. Yes. Additionally, Manin's observation for the 19th century indicated that the skull was intact, leaving facial reconstruction an option. Yeah, I mean, facial reconstruction, sure, but then again, you can try and match it to some of the artistic representation of Alexander, but that would be a little weak. I think absolutely looking for tissue damage and most importantly bone damage, and in general, I mean gender and all that, absolutely this is what they need to do. Will it remain a mystery? Unsurprisingly, the Catholic Church has maintained an absolute refusal to investigate further. That pisses me off. It really pisses me off because at the end of the day, why? Stating that they remain confident in identity based on the observation of Manin. No, that's a cop-out. That's a cop. If you're confident, then let them do it. But then again, in general, relics don't matter to the faith. They really don't. They allowed to take pieces of the alleged shroud of Turin, which had contact directly to Jesus, God himself. Then why do you have a problem with this? And then again, I think they should do it again, by the way, because it's still a piece of cloth. Regardless, whether it was true, authentic or not, it's still a piece of cloth, right? Your faith is based on the living God, if you're a Christian. Hence, this fixation with, oh no, this is, we don't allow that because it's a saint, it's a body of a saint. A saint is a human being, okay? God is the only one that matters from the perspective of a Christian, and therefore, it doesn't make any sense that they oppose to this. I don't get it. Even, let's say that they say, oh yeah, no, this is not Saint Mark, it's actually Alexander the Great. Wouldn't that favor tourism to the location? So maybe they're afraid that they're going to figure out that it's neither. So they do this, and then it's like a body that has nothing to do with this until they lose the... But then again, wouldn't knowing the truth be the right thing to do? So I strongly disagree with that. Actually pisses me off. Yet, if the body moved in 811 was once that of Alexander, the information would have been long forgotten. Manin's records can assert the authenticity of the body interred at the high altar as being that which was taken from Mark's tomb in the crypt. Yes, still he cannot answer the question about the origin of the body that came from Alexandria. Now, yeah, it's a very good point, and so we finish by reading perhaps the theory is a little more than eager speculation, possible. Perhaps Alexander's body was destroyed by Christians in the late 4th century, or perhaps it still lies under the waters of Alexandria, the submerged portions of the ancient city, very likely. Yeah, absolutely possible, yet certainly the mystery is an intriguing one. Yes, and the question and coincidence is curious enough to warrant investigation, I agree. We can only hope that one day the work will be done to provide answers to the mystery of Alexander's Great Tomb. Yeah, absolutely. Very, very well written, bachelor in history and philosophy, I can tell. Very, very nice. So it is interesting, it is fascinating, but I really wish that they let them do this. Because if this was one of those situations where a destructive test would completely destroy the entirety of the whole body and also destroy the whole piece of art and it will be destroyed, then I get it, you want to preserve it. But if you just take a little tissue sample, there's nothing wrong. Also, if what they are saying is, well, no, we don't want it done because we are confident in what this Manin said, sorry, but that sounds like, again, a cop-out, and I personally don't respect that. But anyways, thank you very much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video. And remember, if you're not yet a member of this community, become a noble one. Subscribe to my channel for more content from the Metatron. And remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye.